we're going to do a panel on the future of publishing. Now, what I find interesting about this is because not that long ago, we were having fantastic conversations about how you don't need publishers anymore in this brave new world. And now it feels like we've come full circle. And obviously now it's got a little harder to market things and to deliver things, that we have to think a bit more carefully. So, I mean, what we'll do is we'll basically just get you guys to introduce yourself first. So, Mickael, do you want to start off and explain who you are and what you guys do?
Okay.
Oh,
hi,
hi,
I'm Nogi from Gumi.
Yeah, Nogi then.
Yes, and Gumi is a mobile gaming company based in Japan. They have 850 employees, then it's public in Tokyo Stock Exchange, and then we have several studios in all over the world. And then we have a couple of global hit titles. The one is a Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, and Brave Frontier is our first global hit titles back in 2013. And then I personally ran a PC gaming online gaming company previously in San Francisco. Also, I ran the Korea studio, and then I'm involved in most of global publishing our games. But currently, I'm handling more like AR, VR, but we're gonna launch the VR game next year. That's why I keep running, researching how to publish the VR games. That's why I experience PC, mobile, and VR publishing stuff. That's why I think I can talk about it. Also, I do the blockchain as well. That's why I can talk about many stuff about publishing. Yes,
great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Josh.
Yeah, hi. My name is Josh Bakken. I'm with Tapas Media. Tapas Media is a developer of an open publishing platform for webcomics and novelists. So it's a global free open publishing platform. And so, yeah, that's pretty much what we are. What I do for them is, my title is Head of Innovation. So whereas most of the company is focused on building the best open publishing platform they can, I'm kind of in charge of trying to see where we can take that platform next. And so in this case, and what I've been doing since January, is reaching out to primarily indie devs and saying, hey, we have this great community, 2.1 million monthly active users, about 160,000 daily active users, who really are engaged with this content. So if you're going to build a game and you're focused on mechanics and the fun of the game, come take a look at Tapas, and if there's a story that you see that you gravitate toward and go, you know what, we could take that story and those characters that are already made and put them into our game, then that's something that I'm saying, yeah, go for it. And then once that's done, we can tell all those fans, hey, go check out this game for this property that you guys love. And so I've been doing that since early January, and it's been going really well. So hopefully going to continue that.
Cool. Mickael.
Hi, Mickael. I am VP Marketing at Flaregames. We are a mobile free-to-play publisher. We do only mobile, only free-to-play. We're based in Germany. Yeah, publishing is about, publishing independent games is about 90% of our business. We do have 2 studios that we own, but we also treat them exactly as external studios. And before that, I've been in console publishing at Microsoft and EA, so we can discuss a little bit about comparison between mobile and console publishing as well.
Yeah, and I think kind of key points for me is that we've got, you guys have got a slightly different view on the world than maybe some of the old AAA console teams would have had like 5-10 years ago. And I think that's really what I find really interesting is, what do you think defines what you bring to the publishing world, whether it's directly for the game or for supporting people who are going to bring games to your web brands? What do you guys think you bring that sets you aside, and why it's valuable for a developer to work with you? I was thinking Nogi first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we used to do the third-party developer publishing, but we stopped it. That's why I'm not sure I can give you right answers. But tried many way of the publishing, like not only just UA advertisement, but also collaboration with influencers, the very early days, and then have so much knowledge to publish, as well as recently more important things is community management, because we people is now through the internet easily talk with the users, and then back in the day we didn't listen to the users' feedback that much, but recently, like a Discord, so many communication like platforms that exist, and then we can easily pick up what users are thinking, and then we just just implement those kind of users' preference, complain everything. That kind of know-how is a very we have right now. Then we can provide to the developers.
So, because you talk about kind of AR and VR kind of stuff as well. So, is there a difference between the way that you work with people? On those different platforms, or the way you look at content on those different platforms?
Yes, but basically, mobile PC, as far as I experience, not so different. Most important thing is how we interact with the users. That's, I think, key.
Yeah, exactly. So, Josh, from your point of view, obviously you're working with people. You want to make games using your content. So, how does that affect the way that you work with people?
What we try to do is we try to make a bridge between people who are really passionate about making games and people who are really passionate about creating content, and just kind of providing that bridge. So when we're talking with devs, I never go and pitch IP specifically to them. Don't even talk to them about it. What I do say to them is, hey, come check out Tapas. If you want me to tell you, just to kind of give you like a Cliff Notes version of what's really popular, I can give you like a top 10, and I can tell you like there's this many series that have this many subscribers, like 80 million or 40 million views. I can do that for you, but really go and take a deep dive, and it's been working really well because developers, like, just to give you a really good example, right now we're in the process of making a side-scrolling leveler, right? Level side-scroller, and a demon dating sim. So those are two completely different types of games, two completely different types of developers, and they're nothing that I would have come up with for those particular properties that these people are talking about. So really what I think Tapas is trying to provide and what we're trying to provide is a way for, it's kind of like a library for developers, really. Just go in to the library, look around, crack open a book and go, wow, this is so great. I didn't know this existed before. And it kind of hopefully helps them find some passion for some IP, and helps their resources in terms of them not having to do all that character development and things like that.
I think it's really fascinating when you my son introduced me to Homestuck a few years ago, and it's like the sort of content that didn't make any sense to me before I started looking at it, and I completely understand why it's got such huge fervent fans, cosplay Homestuck characters all the time, and those kind of webcomic kind of they may not be something that you find out about unless you're part of that subculture.
Right.
So I find that fascinating. You guys have actually got access to your webcomic portfolio, but presumably there's a massive subculture in each of those different vehicles.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
So from Flaregames' point of view, it sounds like you're the most traditional in some ways, in terms of the way you work, but you kind of come into this in a slightly different way than usual. Battle. What's the game? I can't remember the.
Raw Revolt.
That's it, Raw Revolt. Which I love Raw Revolt. I love Raw Revolt. When because you were doing that kind of game, and then you've ended up publishing crazy things like Chuck Norris and all this other stuff. So how did you make that transition?
I think it's been really about building blocks on top of each other. I mean, it all started with speaking with developers, understanding what they want exactly. And when we started to do publishing in 2014, 100% of the studios we were meeting were coming to us with the same request. They wanted users and they wanted money. And what they meant most of the time is that they wanted money to get users. So we've been providing that, right? But I think that between 2013 and 2014 and today, we had a couple of stuff that happened. First, the producing a mobile game is becoming more and more difficult, and it's a bigger and bigger investment. Like when we started to do publishing, probably the average funding we're giving was $500,000 to $1 million. Now we're much more into the $3 to $5 million. That means longer projects. That means bigger team. So that means also some help from our side into helping your production. The second thing is the complexity of the marketing. It's not only about getting users. It's not only about doing UA. We discussed about brands this afternoon. We discussed about live ops. All of that means SDKs usually, and like on average at Flaregames, we push 26 SDKs into one game, and as a developer,
only 26.
I know I'm the asshole. So that means that when you realize that, and we do that because it's useful, right? So when you realize that, that means you need to also build tech as a publisher, because it's impossible. I mean, we're about to release a game in 2 weeks from a studio that is like 2 guys in Andorra, and if I push the 26 SDKs to them, that's 6 months. So that means that we as a publisher have to be able to take scope, and half of the resources we have right now, out of 140 people, that's actually tech people that will actually do the SDK integration and build wrappers and stuff like that. So yeah, I think our role has been really evolving over the last 3 to 4 years as a publisher. But I think it's all starting with what studio want. It's really, I'm not here to sell something that people don't want or don't need.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key thing that's happened, is that the nature of what publishing, the barrier to entry to make a game is almost nil. I mean, obviously making a good game is far from nil, but that's another subject. But actually getting that game, I think there is a wider question about who's funding development at the moment, which is, I don't know if we're going to get into that. We'll find out. But I mean, I'll tell you what. Let's try it this way. So, Nogi, when you get involved with the project, what are the decision-making processes that help you guys decide this is the project we're going to do, and what are you looking for to make that happen?
You mean the third-party developers?
Whether it's third-party or internal, when you're making a project, what is it you're specifically looking? What are the conditions that you're looking for that say, yep, this is the project we're going to work with?
So our internally process.
Yeah.
So we have internally the several studios, and then every studio have a game creator and then studio head, and they also always be eager to develop new games. And then we have a certain process. I think I forgot, like 4 or 5 steps, and then one is of course from the planning, and if it's pass, they can just make an alpha version. But we also see the milestone, and they finish the everything on time, and then within the budget, and then quality is exactly same as they planned primarily. Then next is a better version. Those kind of process we do, and then unfortunately sometimes we have to cut off the project.
Of course.
Yeah. Also, not only the project itself, also the outside of the environment is going to change. Suddenly, new game comes up in the compete. You can win, defeat those games, and you have to stop it sometimes. Those are our process at the moment.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's almost a traditional kind of green light process. You've got a vertical slice. Yeah, that passes. You go to a milestone. They pass the milestone, and if at some point they don't, you try to kill early so that you don't end up wasting too much resource. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So from your point of view, obviously you're coming at it in a different way. Do you have a kind of a criteria that you're looking for the partners that you're working with, and some way to monitor that they're actually delivering relevant to that particular brand that they're working with?
So we're a little bit early on in some of our games, but they're going pretty well. I would say the number one thing that I look for, is passion from both the developer and the IP creator. And we get them together, and we get them on Slack, and get them talking, and Skypes, and you can just kind of definitely tell when two
They need to
groups.
swipe right or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But you can definitely tell when the creator's super excited and the developer is just going on and on about how great the IP is and how they love their newest episode and all these other ideas of what they can possibly do in terms of spinning off subsequent games and backstories of side characters. Once you get those situations, that's kind of something that I really look forward to. If there was a situation where a developer jumped on and you could just kind of tell that they were trying to use this as a short way to not have to develop characters for the games. I know I talked about that before, but if it was just strictly kind of like a business,
like a reskin job.
Yeah,
basically.
just kind of like a reskin would be fine, but if there isn't like an excitement or a passion for it, and we can't get the creator on board with the developer in a really exciting and organic, genuine way, then would probably pass on that.
It kind of reminds me of allegedly the worst game of all time, Lord of the Rings bowling.
Right.
Seriously, where they had hobbit heads as the bowling balls. That was the only thing that made it Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, you probably won't see something like that coming from us.
No. Oh, shame.
Maybe, I don't know.
So, Mickael, how does your process compare?
Well, we actually have 3 labels, and the process is slightly different from a label to another. The first one is co-publishing, and I would say co-publishing is the most traditional version of publishing you can think, which means we engage at very early stage, usually when the studio only have a deck, and then we go through the full productions together, and we fund that. It used to be our primary business, so actually very close to console publishing. It used to be our primary business like 3-4 years ago. It's not anymore. And the key problem with that type of publishing is that you can only sign with perfect teams. So if the team doesn't have a pedigree, if you have a couple of staff that are missing and stuff like that, then it makes it very difficult because the risk is really high. And then secondly, you cannot take massive risk on the positioning of the content. So usually you end up signing RPGs and games that are actually for the market today, because you're like, hey, even if the market evolves bad over the next 18 to 24 months, probably I'm still on a market that is big enough today. So even if it's minus 20%, I'm not out of market. Which is exactly why we're doing less and less of that. We still do that, but we do less and less of that. Our biggest part of our business today is what we call the Accelerator, which is a separate label. And in that one, we mainly work with studios that have an MVP that we can put on the market. We've been finding over the times that a lot of studios actually prefer doing their MVPs by themselves. It doesn't require massive resources. It's usually 3-4 months of development. And that's allowing us to take much more risk, because that means that we can put that in the market, we can validate the KPIs, and that means we can work with much smaller studios because the production risk is far less. And we can also take much more risk on the genre. It's like if you ask me, do I believe that the next big thing is fishing game? I don't know. And if I need to put 5 million on the table to know that, I'll probably not do that. But if you have an MVP, I'm more than happy to spend 50K or 100K to get UAs and users into that game, and let's figure it out together, right? So it's a very different process between the 2 different labels. And then we are building a 3rd label for China, and that one is really, we're doing that with our partner Yemobi, and that one it's really about testing in China and seeing what's the appeal in China from Chinese customers.
So it sounds like the level of risk affects the kind of things that you're interested in. In particular, I kind of half imagined you'd say I'd be looking for certain stats in soft launch, but it sounds like you're not necessarily going quite that far.
No, it's tell me about it. I would actually ping back to your talk an hour ago, which is about, and I think that's the key difference between console publishing and mobile publishing, which is on console you're looking for a team that can ship the game. On mobile, you're looking for a team that can run that game for 5 years. And if you look at World Revolt today, for example, Keen is the best example of that. The studio that we work with and then bought in 2014. 2014. They have been running that game for 4 years and a half now, and the revenue today is very similar to the very first month.
Yeah.
And that's the key, right? It's like when I'm meeting people, I'm always asking the question, which is like, are you planning to dedicate the next 4 to 5 years of your life doing that game?
I mean, from Gumi's point of view, it sounds like a lot of the work you're doing is with internal teams, but obviously some are external. But is that what you're looking for too? Is teams that understand how to sustain and live a game, or is making the game enough? And do you have other teams that look after the live operations side?
Basically, current our structure is even the live operation, the people who develop the game that do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, mainly. But we have some exceptions. But mainly, one team just run the game at the moment, and then slightly just replace, allocate the people to the new project. That's what we are doing. Because we cannot take a risk, especially when we become IPO. We tend to just minimize the risk at the moment. That indie company try to just big hit.
Yeah, no, exactly. But it's interesting though, because I think, do you think increasingly that capacity to sort of sustain and manage the service over time becomes a key part of what you need, or do you think at the moment that's not likely to change, that your teams making will continue to be the teams operating?
So as far as we experienced, the gaming developers always want to make a new game. That's more like a management way, how we motivate to just maintain existing game, or how just incentivize the team members. Those are more like a management issue at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've done a lot of time going through this process. I mean, most of my career I've managed services, and what I found fascinating is the transition point from launch. The proportion of the team that is able to transition is actually relatively low most of the time, well, most of my experience. And it's often they're not necessarily as expensive skill sets as well. The ones who can manage a team are often a little bit more cost effective. I'm trying to say that in a nice way. It's not that they're not skilled enough, but they're slightly more abundant, if anything. And it seems to me it's more about kind of the keeping the thing going and actually being smart enough to be able to dissect the original team so that you still sustain the capacity to build new features that are effective, but you may not need as many of them, and you may want to take them to another project. I mean, have you experienced any of that yet? Is that something you've experienced at all?
No.
No. Mickael, have you seen that?
Yeah, I mean, on our side, there's always that. I mean, that question is always coming at some point. First, because I guess most of you experience that when you work on something for like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. At some point, you're just running out of idea and you're getting bored.
Yeah.
And all our studios, there's a point. Especially, it's always starting with the creatives, right? There's a point where those guys are just like, hey, you know what? I've been drawing that characters thousands and thousands of times over the last 4 years and 5 years, and I want to do something else. So you always have the question where the studio wants to transition to another project at some point, and then it's either you give that game to another studio if they're willing to do that, or you build with the same studio a separate team that is doing that. But it's always a very risky time. I would say for World War 2, we did that perfectly. For Non-Stop Diet, we crashed that. That's what crashed the game. We just transitioned out of the studio that was doing that, and that was a big mistake.
And I think it happened. I mean, I think unless you've got that connection, emotional connection and ownership, it's very tough anyway. But I mean, so just from your point of view, it sounds like you're a bit early to experience this stuff. Is that fair?
Yeah, for these projects, I was a free-to-play producer on 2 games.
Okay, so you had the same experience in that context.
Yeah.
So do you see that affecting the games you're currently working on? That are you planning ahead of that? That transition process? So
what we're doing is we're fortunate in that the developers that we've chosen or who've chosen us, depending on how you look at it, they have a track record of putting out games and sustaining those games. So I'm pretty confident that that's something that they'll be able to continue to do and hopefully grow those IP off of the games that they're launching now. So I don't foresee that being an issue in the future for the partners that we have right now.
So, I mean, IP is a good question, actually. I mean, obviously, in the traditional old school space, the publisher would invest in development and would take the IP as part of that process to a certain extent. In this case, obviously, they're licensing effectively your IP. Do they get to keep their own IP for the game itself?
Yes, exactly. So all the source codes and the mechanics of the games, those are all the IP that when they're creating it, they get to keep on those, yes.
Gotcha. And are you guys investing in that process, or are you simply just taking a royalty share off the back end?
Yeah, it's pretty much right now just a revenue share situation, yeah.
And from Flaregames' point of view, are you owning the IP when you hand over UI money, or is it just about revenue shares or some other model?
It depends. I would say it depends from a game to another. Like if you are, if it's a new IP and if you want us to build the IP and spend multi-millions marketing into that, probably we're going to need to get the IP just to mitigate the risk. But I would say it's only half to a third of our contract. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm more interested about the users than the IP. Like, I think one of our value as a publisher is that we have a portfolio of games and we can move the users from a game to another. When I say that sounds really bad because that means people visualize us pushing users into a game to another, which is not what we're doing. But it's about understanding when a user is churning and understanding what kind of other games that you have in your portfolio you would play. And I would right now about 20% of our users actually play a second game, and I'm much more interested.
Classic cross promotion, really, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's about understanding what the user wants as well and have those games for that guy. And I'm much more interested in that than the IP by itself.
Because at the end of the day, that's what gives you ability and power as a publisher beyond your spend. And I think that's one of the things that is often missing. When you try to build a game on your own, you've got to accumulate your audience and leverage that just to make money off your game. If you're a part of a publishing group, in theory at least, they should be able to drive that wider audience to cross promote within that group of that portfolio of products.
Well, you mentioned, funding development as a topic, and I'm always asked the question, should I go for VC? Should I take VC money? Should I go for a publisher? And usually, looking at what my friends in VCs are looking at and what we're looking at, we don't look at the same thing. Because if you're the perfect studio, if you have a development team of 25 people, if you have 10 people in marketing and a user acquisition team, probably you don't need a publisher at all. However, if you're looking for users from an external game that for example, if you're hey, we think that you have that game and we think that the user of that game would love our games as well, then probably what you want is a publisher and not just VC money.
Yeah. So before we get into that, I think we should follow that one up, but before we do that, I want to ask Ohnogi, in terms of obviously the IP side, it's mostly internal from what I've understood you say, but this whole idea about cross-promoting between games, is that something that's important to the way you operate? Are you looking to help help keep the audience within that portfolio of games you guys work on?
So we actually do IP collaboration things a lot. Some of games are doing that every month, and as you can imagine, so different IP has the different users, and then they collaborate, then exchange, the users, and then the fundamental our user base is going increasing. This is a very very significant marketing way at the moment. Then you have many partners right now. Not only other IP, also influencers, so people, game, anime, everything.
And I think that's really powerful, because I think, fundamentally, the fact that you're not just looking about building your community within your own games, you're actually looking for external partners that maybe not in the game space, but in that wider space. I think, do you think that gives you kind of extra audience mind share, for want of a better phrase? It's a horrible phrase, but, the idea of keeping the attention of a wider group of people as a result. Does that really work for you?
Yeah, I think so. Because generally we start like a UA, but the number of users we can get from UA is limited, and then need to the next stage. Then the Japan case, we do the mass marketing like a TV commercial, and we have tons of users. But still, if we want more users, we need to collaborate other IPs. Those kind of things are our basic strategy.
Yeah. Have you seen any of that in your space? Because obviously when you've got these webcomics, you can have segmented audiences within them. Do you get that kind of special guest appearance, crossover effect within your portfolio?
Not so much special guest appearance, but we definitely track genres, and we definitely put collections together for ones that we think make sense. Another thing that we do to kind of keep mindshare is we're really open to working with different types of partners. So we have a kind of a homespun advertising network on Tapas, and recently we just signed a deal with a cosmetics company of all things, and so they're very
cosplay's a big thing.
Yeah, and so so hopefully we can, and we're in the process of branching out. So that people see us as webcomics, but then also other interests on the platform as well.
So, to move further forward, I'm thinking about now. We've established that there's an operational, concern. We've got to find the right team, delivering the right game. Do we think that most games teams need a publisher? Or, you mentioned this to a certain extent as well. Do they need a publisher, or is it specific kinds of content that when they want to scale, that's when they need to work with a publisher, whether it's you guys or someone else? What do you think, Mickael?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's for everybody. I think it's, with the entry barrier in our industry and with the cost of bringing a mobile game to market, and even more bringing a successful mobile game to market going up every year and pretty much every month, I think it's more and more people. So we actually speak now with a lot of people that publish their first and second games and self-publish that, did that actually very successfully, but now they want to work with a publisher. We worked with Limbic actually from here. On Zombie Gunship, and that was exactly the case. Zombie Gunship, the first one, was self-published, very successful, but for the second one and for a transition to free-to-play, they wanted the help of the publisher. But no, you have, I think you have studios that have internal publishing capacities, and those guys are not necessarily looking for a publisher, and you have studios that want to build internal publishing capacities, and if it's your vision, if it's in your DNA, and if it's what you promise to your investors, then probably you should not work with a publisher.
Ohnogi, what do you think? Do you think people should be looking for a publisher, or should more people trying to become their own self-publishing process?
It depends, but personally, the situation is changing. Like I told you guys at the beginning, so there are so many community platform like a Discord, and I thought this is a PR case. So our one of subsidiary just launched a very early launch, like alpha version, then just launching the Steam because we wanted to have a user feedback, and then we just implemented based on the user feedback, and then the point is we really believe just acquire user as early as possible, then build a community, and they keep doing that, and then try to develop game with users, and then we already have basic users, and then those users just influence other users. That case, I don't think we don't need publishers, especially BR. There's a huge medias. We cannot do any advertisement. That's why influence way is very important. But I think the mobile should be same.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think I think increasingly a lesson, whether you're going to choose to go for the publisher or not, I think the lesson any developer should take from that is the earlier you can get people excited about what you're trying to do, the better. And I think one of the things that Kickstarter is still good at, if you can find a wider audience, or if you're tapping into the audience that lives in that space, is that you can create noise and interest, but showing you listening and being authentic means you can take them with you.
Yeah, one thing I will add though is it depends on your ambitions, your global ambitions, let's say. So Tencent, of all mighty giants of companies, we actually publish Tencent comics and animation through Tapas. So it's not that they can't afford to do that in the States or in the Western markets, but they've actually chosen us to do localization and publishing of some of their titles. And so I think we would probably do the same thing when we go into. Well, I know we already have deals where we have webcomic publishers that are in Japan, South Korea. It's not something that we want to tackle ourselves. So I think it just depends on your ambition for your content.
So I think it's really interesting. But do you have like a kind of a preferred partner you work with for the Asian market for sort of more anime style of kind of webcomic type stuff, or do you just simply have your space and they go and find other things elsewhere?
So what we do is we work with some major content. I mentioned Tencent. There's also another one out of China called U17, who's also a really big comic and manga publisher. So we work with them, and we reciprocate that relationship. So when we build something more of a Western flavor, we present that to them and see if that's something that they want to try to launch in their territories.
I mean, and obviously this is something that's come up quite a lot in games, where how we handle Western market content versus Eastern market content is something, particularly with China, but to a certain extent Japan, we have to be kind of careful how we handle that. Is that something that's becoming more kind of globalized, or are you seeing that actually these dedicated connections matter to you?
Yeah, that's a big topic at Flare, and that has been, I would say, that has been even more relevant. Like back to when we started publishing, 2013, 2014, people were coming with us, like studios were just coming with us, and they were like giving us global publishing rights. More and more, we see studios like asking questions about what's your strategy around Middle East, what's your strategy around China, what's your strategy around Japan, because they're also considering working with different publishers, like local publishers. I mean, on our side, we think that, and through our experience with our own games, World Revolt and Nonstop Night, we think that China is actually easier than what people think. I mean, like getting in the top 100 in China is crazy difficult, but China is about 25% of the mobile market. Getting like 20 to 25% of your revenue of your game from China is actually something like easier than what people think. You don't need to redo the whole game for that. So that's why we invest into that label with Yemobi, to actually find a door for Western developers to go to China into a very different way, which is not remaking your whole game, but it's just looking at your game today and what are the low-hanging fruits that we can do, what are the 2-3 SDKs that we can plug, and then go to China. And if you play Nonstop Night in China, for example, you will not notice any difference compared to the Western version, and China is still 52% of our revenue to date. So it's possible.
And Nogi, from your point of view, do you treat Western market any different from the home market, the Japanese market?
If you're talking about detail, it's very different.
Yeah.
But so our case is we primarily launch in Japan, and then once it becomes successful, we localize, publish. Yeah. And then in our experience, we try to adjust character, also like game live operation wise, and for example in China, Chinese users consume items that are much faster. That's why we implemented more event. But at the end, we find out the users talking community site. They just wanted to have exactly same as Japan operation. They didn't want to have a very Chinese specific contents. That was I really surprised. It's actually same as US and Korea. Yeah. Okay. So because we launched Japan first, then user just notified like a Facebook page or something that, like I told you, they just get information easily. Then if we just launch globally simultaneously, it could be okay. But our case is Japan first, and then user see, and they will launch different one. They are not satisfied. That's I just realized.
Gotcha. So we're about to run out of time. So I've got my last question. What kind of games excite you, and what are you looking forward to? What are you looking for within a game? Who wants to start with that? Josh, actually, why don't you start? What are you looking for in a game?
Personally, or
for a game that you would work with?
Gosh, just creativity and something that is out of the box. I'm not. I do speak for Tapas on the subject of games, and we're not looking to do clones of anything out there. So hopefully when somebody sees a game that has the Tapas brand attached to it, you're going to see something really true to its source content and something really interesting. So it's basically a love letter to the fans, and hopefully the devs get behind that. That's what we're looking for.
Great. Mickael?
I would say service, in a way that, when we come to a show, like we went to GDC, for example, we saw 600 games. I would say probably 150 to 200 were really great ideas and really great projects. But what makes the difference is that you have 10 to 15 people that will really present you projects where they don't really think about, it's not only about like, hey, I want to make that game, but it's really about, hey, this is how I think the service, this is really how I think how users are going to interact with my product, how they're going to interact in the product, how they're going to interact outside of the product with the community, and that makes the huge difference for me. It's exactly, I'm always, so just one thing, I'm always comparing that to going into an airplane, right? It's like you have, like airlines are always telling you, hey, you had a great experience because like, the flight went well and it was on time, but if you had a shitty experience at the airport, then it's shit, and that's the first thing you remember. And it's exactly the same thing here. If you just think like that part of the experience, and if you don't think your experience as a whole, you're likely to have users having a shitty experience because of that.
It's the whole holistic experience, yeah.
Exactly.
So Ohnogi, what's the thing you're looking for?
Yes, so we still invest. The VR is now a VR MMORPG, also open world game, and Minecraft type of VR game. Also any type of AR game, but this should be an AR first game. Not a copy some existing game to the AR. This should be AR first game, and a blockchain game. That's what we're looking for. Then we are willingly consider to invest.
We didn't get into blockchain. I mean, we should have done more of that. At least we have a couple of tracks that were dealing with that. So, on that note, with the seconds ticking away, I'm going to say thank you very much to the panel for their time. Thank you for taking part. I think we're basically getting to the end of the day. So, on that note, I'd like to thank you all for spending time with us in this room. I think we've got a whole bunch of things today. We've tried to look at the way that people, get started in the industry, and how even people who are still working in the sort of bigger end of the scheme of things, the AAAs, the EAs, and the Niantics, they're still thinking about the fundamental questions of play and delight and excitement as much as they're thinking about the ways of turning into revenue. And we've had a whole bunch of people talking about how do we look at the brands, how do we think about the questions that we ask. And I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways was one of the things that Thomas was talking about earlier, the idea that we're building hypotheses that we're testing. And I think, as someone who's a massive fan of the whole scientific method anyway, for me that's brilliant. The fact that we don't have to worry about, we want to be creative, we absolutely have to be creative, but the creative process is an idea which we can test. And if it works, and we can help people engage with that, we can make amazingly interesting, vibrant, delightful games that people will want to willingly spend money on because it's worthwhile. And we have an amazing industry that lets people engage in entertainment that they do. They don't just passively receive. And that's an incredible thing that builds autonomy, a sense of confidence, a sense of escape in this world we're currently in, we sorely need. And on that note, thank you very much.